Imagine living in a place where the sun is not a companion, but an adversary, where the air doesn't move, it presses, it wraps itself around you like something alive, something heavy, something that doesn't let go, where stepping outside at noon feels less like walking and more like wading through a thickness you can almost see, almost taste. Now imagine that this isn't a vacation gone wrong. This isn't a scenic drive through the desert with the air conditioning on full blast and a cold bottle of water in the cup holder. This is home. This is where you wake up, where you raise your children, where you grow old. There are places in America, real places on real maps with real zip codes, where 120 degrees Fahrenheit is not a headline, it's not a record, it's a season, where temperatures that would shut down cities or cancel flights and fill emergency rooms are simply Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The weeks blur together under that relentless pale sky, and people live there, not because they're trapped, though some might argue the desert has a way of holding on to those who wander in. They live there because something about these places, despite everything, despite the danger, despite the isolation, despite a landscape that seems almost hostile to the very idea of human existence, something about them holds. This is not a video about crime. There are no villains here, at least not the kind with faces. The danger in these communities is older, larger, and far more indifferent than anything human. It is the land itself, the air itself, the sun that rises every morning with the same burning patience, asking the same ancient question: how badly do you want to stay? Today we're driving into the heart of that question, across salt flats and abandoned mines, through one-stoplight towns and places where the stoplights gave up long ago. We're going to meet 10 communities, 10 small, stubborn clusters of human life scattered across the hottest, most unforgiving corners of the American desert. Their stories are quiet, but they burn. Let's begin. Needles, California. The first thing you notice here isn't the buildings. It isn't the handful of motels lining the old Route 66 corridor. Their signs faded to a soft, nostalgic pastel. It isn't the railroad tracks that slice through the center of town like a spine. The first thing you notice is the air. It hits you the moment you step out of your car. A wall of dry, radiant heat that seems to come from every direction at once. From the pavement beneath your feet, from the walls of the buildings, from the sky itself, which hangs low and pale, a washed out blue that looks almost white at the edges. There is no breeze. There is only heat and the strange high-pitched hum of silence that comes with it. Needles sits in the Mojave Desert, pressed against the California-Arizona border, cradled in a valley along the Colorado River. And that valley, beautiful as it is, functions as a kind of geological oven. The surrounding mountains trap the hot air, hold it in place, and let the sun do its work. In summer, temperatures here routinely exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Some days they push past 120. The National Weather Service has, on more than one occasion, identified Needles as the hottest place in the nation on a given day. Not Death Valley, not Phoenix, Needles. With a population hovering around 5,000, it is the largest community on our list, and in many ways the most recognizable. Route 66 travelers have been passing through Needles for nearly a century. It was once a vital waypoint, a place where you stopped for gas, for water, for a moment of shade before pressing on toward the California coast or back into the Arizona desert. There was purpose in that, identity. The town existed because the road existed, and the road brought people, and people brought life. Walk through Needles in the middle of July and the streets are empty, not abandoned, empty. There's a difference. Abandoned means no one is coming back. Empty means everyone is inside, behind closed doors and drawn curtains, waiting for the sun to drop low enough that the world becomes livable again. Life here doesn't follow the clock. It follows the thermometer. Errands happen at 6 a.m. or 9 p.m. The hours between noon and 4 belong to the heat, and the heat does not share. Ask someone in Needles why they stay, and the answers are rarely dramatic. It's quiet. I know my neighbors. The river's right there. They say it plainly without sentimentality, the way you might explain why you prefer a certain chair. It's not that the heat doesn't bother them, it does. They just decided at some point that the heat is a price they're willing to pay, and maybe that's the first lesson the desert teaches you. Everything has a cost. The question is whether you're willing to meet it. Ajo, Arizona. The name comes from the O'odham word for paint, or perhaps from the Spanish word for garlic. No one is entirely sure, and the town itself doesn't seem to mind the ambiguity. What is certain is this: Ajo was built by copper, and when the copper left, the town had to decide what it was without it. Sitting roughly 130 miles southwest of Phoenix, closer to the Mexican border than to any major American city, The town plaza, designed in the 1910s by the Phelps Dodge Mining Company, is strikingly handsome, a sweeping arc of Spanish colonial revival architecture that wouldn't look out of place in a high-end resort brochure. There's a church, a covered arcade, streets laid out with care and intention. Summer in Ajo is a test of patience. The Sonoran Desert doesn't do anything halfway. The heat here is not the dry, brittle heat of the Mojave. It carries a faint heaviness, a promise of monsoon moisture that sometimes delivers and sometimes doesn't. The saguaro cacti stand like sentinels on the surrounding hillsides, their arms raised as if in permanent surrender to the sun. By midday, the shadows shrink to nothing, and every surface, every wall, every stone, every inch of road radiates heat back upward, so the warmth comes at you from above and below simultaneously. You are quite literally cooked from both directions. And yet, there is something happening in Ajo that no one predicted. Artists have found it, retirees seeking something beyond the manicured blandness of Phoenix suburbs have found it. A small but determined community of new residents, drawn by the architecture, the cheap real estate, the proximity to the Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument, and a certain indefinable quality of light, has begun to fill in the gaps left by the miners. The International Sonoran Desert Alliance has worked to restore the plaza buildings, to create studios and residences, to transform Ajo from a town defined by what it lost into one defined by what it's choosing to become. It's an ongoing project, an imperfect one. The mine pit still gapes, the heat still punishes, but there are murals now on some of the walls, and a farmer's market on certain weekends, and the sound of conversation drifting from the Curly School, a renovated 1919 schoolhouse turned artist residence. Whether it succeeds, whether any of these towns can succeed in the way the modern world measures success, is a question the desert doesn't answer. But the desert only watches. QUARTZSITE, Arizona. This is a town that breathes. It inhales in winter, swelling from a few thousand permanent residents to a temporary population that can exceed 1 million over the course of the season, and exhales in summer, contracting back to its skeleton, its bones, its quiet, heat-stunned core. In January, QUARTZSITE hosts the largest gem and mineral show in the world. RV enthusiasts, rock hounds, snowbirds, and wanderers of every description descend on this tiny interchange along Interstate 10, turning the surrounding desert into a sprawling, unplanned city of aluminum and canvas. There are swap meets and flea markets, vendors selling everything from polished amethyst to handmade jewelry to questionable beef jerky. The energy is chaotic, communal, and strangely joyful. But we're not here in January, we're here in July. And in July, QUARTZSITE reveals its true face, the permanent population, and somewhere around 3,700, though census figures are tricky in a place where permanent is a flexible concept, lives with a particular kind of duality. For half the year, they are surrounded by people, by noise, by commerce. For the other half, they are alone with the desert, and the desert in summer is not generous. Temperatures regularly exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The landscape is flat, sparse, and almost aggressively featureless. Creosote bush and gravel stretching to a horizon that never seems to get any closer. The La Poza Plain, where the winter RV cities bloom, becomes an empty expanse of hardpan and dust. The silence is not peaceful, it is comprehensive. It fills every space, presses against every window. The people who stay through summer are, by necessity, self-reliant. Many live off-grid or semi-off-grid, their lives organized around water conservation, generator maintenance, and the careful management of shade. They shop in bulk. They travel to larger towns for medical care. They know intimately the difference between 110 degrees and 120 degrees. A difference that to someone from a temperate climate might seem academic, but here is the difference between discomfort and genuine danger. What keeps them here? Some will tell you it's the freedom, the absence of rules, of HOAs, of the 1,000 small regulations that govern life in more conventional places. Others will say it's the rocks, the geological treasures buried in the surrounding hills, the thrill of finding a piece of agate or quartz that will, over time, be polished into something beautiful. And some will just gesture at the desert, at the vast, empty, terrible, gorgeous sweep of it, and say nothing at all. TRONA, California. There are places that feel forgotten, and then there are places that feel like they were never quite remembered in the first place. TRONA sits at the edge of Searles Dry Lake in the upper Mojave Desert, roughly 170 miles northeast of Los Angeles. To reach it, you drive through a landscape that becomes progressively more alien. The brown hills give way to flat, bleached plains. The road narrows, and eventually you arrive at a town that looks less like a community and more like a process. Because that's what TRONA is, fundamentally. It is a town that exists to extract minerals from the earth. The Searles Valley Minerals Plant, the town's largest employer, and in many ways, its reason for being. It processes brine from beneath the dry lake bed, extracting borax, soda ash, and other chemicals. Plant structures dominate the skyline, a tangle of pipes and conveyors and storage tanks that hiss and rumble at all hours. The air here sometimes carries a faint mineral tang, a sharpness that sits on the back of your tongue. With a population of roughly 1,700, TRONA is a company town in the most traditional sense, even though the company has changed hands multiple times. The houses, many of them originally built for mine workers, are modest, functional, and increasingly showing their age. Some are well maintained with small yards and covered porches. Others stand empty, their windows dark, their doors closed against a heat that doesn't discriminate between the occupied and the abandoned. Summer temperatures in TRONA regularly exceed 110 degrees Fahrenheit, with spikes pushing toward 120. But here, the heat is only part of the challenge. TRONA is isolated. The nearest town of any size, Ridgecrest, is a 25-mile drive across the desert, and Ridgecrest itself is hardly a metropolis. Medical emergencies, grocery runs, even basic social interaction. Everything requires distance. Everything requires planning. There is a phrase you hear sometimes in towns like TRONA: it's not for everyone. It's said without judgment, without defensiveness. It's simply a statement of fact, as plain and undeniable as the dry lake bed that stretches to the horizon, white as bone under the desert sun. Baker, California. You've probably driven through Baker without knowing its name, if you've ever made the trip from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and millions do every year. You've passed through this thin strip of civilization at the edge of the Mojave, roughly halfway between the two cities. You might have stopped for gas. You might have glanced at the thermometer, that absurd, wonderful 134-foot monument to heat that stands as Baker's most honest landmark, and thought briefly, who lives here? About 700 people. That's who. Baker exists because of the intersection. Interstate 15 passes through, carrying an endless stream of weekend gamblers, vacationers, and long-haul truckers. State Route 127 branches north toward Death Valley. Baker is the last chance for fuel, for food, for a functioning restroom before the landscape swallows you whole. It is a waypoint, a pause, a breath between destinations. And because Baker is a waypoint, its rhythm is not its own. It belongs to the road. The town pulses with traffic on Friday evenings and Sunday nights, as the Vegas-bound and Vegas-returning crowds surge through. But between those pulses, Baker is quiet. Remarkably, almost impossibly quiet. Summer here is no joke. The thermometer, built in 1991 to commemorate the record 134 degrees Fahrenheit temperature once recorded in nearby Death Valley, is not just a tourist attraction, it's a daily report card. When the display reads 115, 118, 121, the people of Baker don't look up. They know. They've adapted their lives around a schedule dictated by the sun. Work starts before dawn. Outdoor activity ceases by mid-morning. Afternoons are spent indoors, in the hum of air conditioning that is not a luxury, but a medical necessity. The Alien Fresh Jerky Shop, Baker's quirkiest business, a UFO-themed roadside attraction, draws visitors in with its novelty, but even it can't compete with the heat on the worst days. There is a motel, there is a Denny's, there is the Mad Greek, a restaurant that has achieved an almost mythical status among road trippers for its strawberry milkshakes. These businesses are Baker's lifeline, its economic heartbeat, entirely dependent on the travelers who pass through. But what about the people who don't pass through? The ones who stay? They are the cooks and the clerks, the gas station operators and the maintenance workers. They are the invisible infrastructure of a place that most people experience only as a 10-minute pit stop. And they live with a paradox, surrounded by millions of passing strangers. They are among the most isolated people in California. TECOPA, California, in a landscape defined by absence. Absence of water, absence of shade, absence of the thousand small comforts that make life easy. TECOPA is an anomaly, a warm, wet, unexpected anomaly, nestled in the Amargosa Valley, southeast of Death Valley National Park, and just a few miles from the Nevada border. TECOPA sits atop a network of natural hot springs that have been flowing, quietly and persistently, for thousands of years. The Shoshone people knew these springs. The miners and prospectors who passed through in the 1800s knew them, and now a small community of roughly 150 people has built a life around them. The springs are TECOPA's heartbeat. 2 public bathhouses, operated by the county, free to use, offer mineral-rich hot water that flows continuously, naturally heated to temperatures exceeding 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Visitors soak in the tiled pools, the desert silence pressing in from all sides, the steam rising into air that is already impossibly hot. It is a strange experience, willingly immersing yourself in hot water when the ambient temperature is triple digits. And yet people do it. They swear by it. They say the minerals ease joint pain, soothe skin conditions, wash away something deeper than dirt. Summer in TECOPA is brutal. Temperatures routinely exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit, and the surrounding landscape, the Amargosa Desert, the Nopa Range, the Resting Spring Range, offers no shelter, no compromise. The beauty here is severe. The mountains are streaked with mineral deposits, reds, yellows, purples, that glow in the evening light with an almost hallucinatory intensity. The sky at night is a riot of stars, see unspoiled by any significant light source for 100 miles in any direction. The community is eclectic. There are retirees who came for the springs and stayed for the solitude. There are artists drawn by the landscape's surreal palette. There are a few small businesses, a cafe, a campground, a dehydrated date farm, that operate on desert time, which is to say, slowly, deliberately, and with an acceptance that some days the heat will simply win. What TECOPA offers, that many of these other towns don't, is a reason to be here that goes beyond stubbornness or economics. The springs are a gift, an improbable one, and they give this tiny community something precious, a gathering place, a center, a warm and mineral-scented heart. Terlingua, Texas. Let us be clear about something. Terlingua is not an easy place to reach. It sits in the far western wedge of Texas, in Brewster County, the largest county in the state, an area bigger than Connecticut, with a population smaller than a mid-sized apartment building. The nearest city of any significance is over 200 miles away. The nearest hospital is 80 miles. The nearest traffic light is, well, no one is entirely sure, but it's far. To get to Terlingua, you drive. You drive through the Trans-Pecos region, past mile after mile of open rangeland and desert scrub, through towns that are themselves barely there, until the road begins to descend toward the Rio Grande, and the world opens up into something vast and humbling. Big Bend of the river, where the Rio Grande curves in a great southward arc, creates a landscape of such dramatic beauty that it almost feels staged. Canyons drop hundreds of feet. The rock is layered in bands of red and white and gray, a geological autobiography written in stone. Terlingua is 2 places really. There is Terlingua Ghost Town, the remains of the old cinnabar mining operation that drew workers here in the early 1900s, and Study Butte Terlingua, the slightly more developed area along Route 170. Together they're home to maybe 60 or 70 full-time residents, though the numbers fluctuate with the seasons and the whims of the desert. Summer heat in Terlingua is ferocious. Daytime highs routinely crack 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and the low desert elevation offers no relief. But it is the isolation that defines life here more than the temperature. Terlingua is one of the most remote inhabited places in the lower 48 states. There is no 911 response that will arrive in minutes. There is no grocery store in the conventional sense. Water is trucked in or drawn from wells of uncertain reliability. Terlingua is proof of something both obvious and profound. Ruin is not necessarily an ending. Sometimes it's a foundation. A small, tenacious constellation of human life scattered across the hottest, driest, and harshest corners of the American West. From Needles, with its fading Route 66 glory and its 5,000 quiet souls, to Darwin, with its unpaved roads and its population of not much. What do they have in common? On the surface, very little. Some were built by mining, some by the road, some by nothing more than the stubbornness of the people who happened to stop there. Some are growing in their small way, others are shrinking, slowly, inevitably, the way a puddle shrinks in the midday sun. Some have reinvented themselves, others have simply persisted, which is in its way its own form of reinvention. But beneath the surface, beneath the cracked asphalt and the peeling paint and the silent sun-blasted streets, there is a thread, a common, quiet thread that runs through all of them. These are places that the world has, in many ways, moved past. The highways rerouted, the mines closed, the industries shifted, the young people left for cities where the temperature doesn't define your daily schedule, and the nearest hospital isn't an hour's drive away. By every conventional measure of progress, these towns should not exist. The economics don't work, the geography is hostile, the future, on paper, is bleak, and yet they hold on. They hold on to a memory of a time when the mine was producing, when the road was busy, when the town was full. They hold on to an industry, a mineral plant, a resort, a gas station at a crossroads that provides just enough to keep the lights on. They hold on to a way of life. Slower, harder, more exposed to the elements and to each other, that, for all its hardships, offers something that the comfortable, connected, climate-controlled modern world often does not. Space, silence, the luxury of being left alone. There is a certain kind of person who hears that and understands it immediately and completely. And there is a certain kind of person who hears it and thinks, why would anyone choose that? Both responses are valid. The desert doesn't judge. The desert simply is. It was here before any of these towns, and it will be here after the last one is gone. It doesn't care whether you stay or leave, whether you admire it or fear it, whether you find beauty in its silence or only emptiness. It offers the same terms to everyone. This is what I am. Take it or don't. These 10 communities, Needles, QUARTZSITE, TRONA, Baker, Goldfield, TECOPA, Terlingua, Furnace Creek, or Darwin. They took it every day, in every season, through every punishing summer and every quiet star-filled winter night. They take it. And in doing so, they become something more than dots on a map. They become evidence. Evidence that the human capacity for adaptation, for endurance, for finding meaning in places the world has forgotten is deeper and more stubborn than any heat index can measure. They are the quiet monuments of resilience, and they deserve to be seen.